The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Vincent Parker's weathered face as he rode toward the old cottonwood grove at the edge of his property, expecting to find another calf that had wandered off. But instead, he found a woman in a faded blue dress standing on her tiptoes, carefully carving something into the bark of the largest tree with a small knife. Vincent pulled his horse to a stop, dust settling around the mare's hooves as he dismounted with practiced ease. The woman hadn't noticed him yet, so absorbed was she in her task. He moved closer, his boots making soft sounds against the dry earth, and that's when he saw it clearly. His own name, Vincent Parker, carved in careful letters into the ancient bark. The woman must have sensed him then, because she spun around with a gasp, the knife clattering to the ground. Her eyes, the color of dark honey, went wide with shock and embarrassment. Vincent recognized her immediately, though they'd never spoken more than a few words in passing. Eleanor Preston, the quiet seamstress who lived on the small property just beyond his ranch boundaries, about 3 miles east toward Las Animas, Colorado. "Mr. Parker, I can explain," she stammered, her cheeks flushing red as prairie wildflowers. She was perhaps 23 or 24, he guessed, with chestnut hair pulled back in a simple bun that was now coming loose from her startled movement. Vincent himself was 27, and he'd been alone on his ranch for the better part of 3 years since his father passed. "Seems pretty clear what's happening," Vincent said, keeping his voice neutral though his heart had started beating faster in his chest. "That's my name you're carving there." Eleanor's hands twisted in her skirt, and for a moment he thought she might run, but she stood her ground, lifting her chin slightly in a gesture of defiance that surprised him. "I suppose it is," she said quietly. "I suppose you think I'm foolish." "I don't know what I think," Vincent admitted honestly. He picked up the small knife from the ground and held it out to her. "Why don't you tell me why you're carving my name into a tree?" She took the knife with trembling fingers, sliding it into a pocket in her dress. "I've been watching you for 3 years, Mr. Parker. Not in any improper way, you understand, but I've seen how hard you work your land. I've seen how you helped the widow Crawford when her barn burned down. I've watched you ride into town every Saturday to sell your cattle and buy supplies, and you always have a kind word for everyone, even those who don't deserve it." Vincent felt something shift in his chest, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the Colorado sun. "You've been watching me for 3 years. I know it sounds strange," Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength. "I've lived on my little property since my aunt died and left it to me 4 years ago. I make dresses and alterations for the ladies in Las Animas. It's not much, but it's honest work. And every day when I hang my washing or tend my garden, I can see your ranch in the distance. I've watched you build that new fence line. I've seen you break horses in your corral, and somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Vincent had been lonely for so long that he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone care about him, truly care, beyond neighborly concern. His mother had died when he was young, and his father had been a hard man who showed affection through work rather than words. Since his father's passing, Vincent had poured everything into the ranch, into building something lasting, but there'd been no one to share it with. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Vincent asked, stepping closer to her. "Why carve my name on a tree instead of just talking to me?" Eleanor's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Because men like you don't notice women like me. You're strong and capable, respected in Las Animas. I'm just a seamstress with a small piece of land and calloused fingers from pushing needles through fabric. I thought maybe if I carved your name here in this place where no one comes, I could have something of you, even if I could never really have you." Vincent reached out and gently took her hand, feeling the calluses she'd mentioned, the roughness that came from honest work. His own hands were just as rough, marked by rope burns and sun damage. "You're wrong," he said softly. "I do notice you. I've noticed you every Saturday for the past year when you come into town at the same time I do. I've noticed the way you smile at children and the way you always stop to pet that old hound that sits outside the general store." "You have." Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. "I have," Vincent confirmed. "Truth is, I thought about talking to you more times than I can count, but I figured a woman as pretty as you must have suitors lined up, and I'm just a rancher who smells like cattle and dirt most days." Eleanor laughed then, a sound like water over river stones, light and genuine. "I don't have any suitors, Mr. Parker, and I happen to think cattle and dirt smell just fine." "Vincent," he corrected, still holding her hand. "If you've been in love with me for 3 years, I think you should call me Vincent." "Vincent," she repeated, and the way she said his name made something in his soul settle into place, like a piece of a puzzle he hadn't known was missing. They stood there in the shade of the cottonwood tree, hands clasped, looking at each other as if seeing clearly for the first time. The afternoon stretched around them, golden and perfect, and Vincent made a decision that felt as natural as breathing. "Eleanor Preston, would you do me the honor of joining me for supper tonight? I can't promise fancy cooking, but I make a decent stew, and I'd very much like to hear more about these 3 years you've spent watching me from afar." Eleanor's smile could have lit up the darkest night. "I would love that, Vincent, but only if you let me bring dessert. I make a good apple pie." "Then it's settled," Vincent said, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Come by around sunset. You know where my ranch is, after all." She laughed again, that wonderful sound, and nodded. "I do indeed." Vincent helped her onto her horse, a gentle mare that had been grazing nearby, and watched as she rode off toward her property. Before she disappeared from view, she turned back once, waving at him, and he waved back, feeling like a young man experiencing his first bout of affection. He looked back at the tree, at his name carved carefully into the bark, and traced the letters with his fingers. Someone had loved him from afar for 3 years. Someone had thought him worthy of such devotion. The knowledge filled him with a determination to prove her faith in him had not been misplaced. Vincent rode back to his ranch house with a purpose he hadn't felt in years. The house was modest, a sturdy structure his father had built with timber from the mountains. It had 3 rooms and a kitchen, with a front porch that looked out over the grazing land. He'd kept it clean and functional, but it lacked the touches that made a house a home. There were no curtains on the windows, no flowers in the garden, no warmth beyond what was strictly necessary. He spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning with a fervor that would have surprised anyone who knew him. He swept the floors, dusted surfaces he hadn't touched in months, and even picked wildflowers from the meadow to put in a jar on the table. He made his stew with extra care, adding the good vegetables he'd been saving and seasoning it properly, instead of just throwing everything together. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Vincent changed into his cleanest shirt and combed his dark hair back. He caught his reflection in the small mirror by the door and barely recognized himself. His blue eyes, usually so serious, held something new. Hope. Eleanor arrived just as the first stars began appearing in the darkening sky. She changed into a dress of deep green that brought out the warmth in her eyes, and her hair was now neatly arranged, though a few strands escaped to frame her face. She carried a pie that smelled like cinnamon and butter and home. "I wasn't sure you'd really come," Vincent admitted as he helped her down from her horse. "I wasn't sure you'd really want me to," Eleanor replied. "I thought maybe once you had time to think about it, you'd realize I was just a strange woman who carves names into trees." Vincent took the pie from her hands and set it carefully on the porch railing. Then he turned to her, his expression serious. "Eleanor, I've been alone for a long time. Not just since my father died, but really alone in a way that goes deeper than just not having people around. I'd convinced myself that was just how life was, that some people were meant to work their land and live quietly, and that was enough. But today, when I saw you at that tree, when I heard you say you'd been watching me, that you'd fallen in love with me, something changed. I feel like I've been asleep and just woke up." Eleanor's eyes shone in the fading light. "I feel that too. I've been living half a life, loving someone from a distance because I was too afraid to risk rejection. But today, when you found me, when you didn't laugh or turn away, I felt alive for the first time in years." They stood there on the porch for a long moment, the evening settling around them like a comfortable blanket. Then Vincent gestured toward the door. "Come inside. Let me feed you and we can talk properly." The interior of the house was simple but clean, and Eleanor looked around with genuine interest. "It's lovely," she said, touching the wildflowers he'd placed on the table. "These are sweet." "I picked them this afternoon," Vincent admitted, feeling slightly embarrassed. "Seemed like the thing to do." They sat down to eat, and at first the conversation was hesitant, both of them feeling the weight of 3 years of unspoken feelings. But as they shared the meal, the words began to flow more easily. Eleanor told him about her life, about losing her parents when she was young and being raised by her aunt, a stern but loving woman who taught her to sew and to stand on her own 2 feet. "When Aunt Martha died, she left me her property and enough money to get by for a while. I thought about leaving Las Animas, going somewhere bigger, somewhere with more opportunities, but I couldn't make myself do it. Something kept me here." "What was it?" Vincent asked, though he thought he might know the answer. "You," Eleanor said simply. "I'd already started noticing you by then. The way you'd helped your father in his final illness, nursing him yourself instead of sending him away. The way you'd taken over the ranch and worked from dawn to dusk to make it thrive. I thought, that's a good man. That's the kind of man worth staying for." Vincent felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I wish I'd known. I wish I'd talked to you sooner." "We're talking now," Eleanor said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "That's what matters." They finished the meal and moved to the porch with the pie, sitting on the steps and watching the stars emerge in full glory above them. The night was warm for late spring, and the sounds of the ranch settled around them, the occasional lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of wind through grass. "Tell me about your dreams," Eleanor said softly. "What do you want from life, Vincent Parker?" No one had ever asked him that before. Vincent thought carefully before answering. "I want to build something lasting. I want this ranch to be something I can be proud of, something that feeds people and provides good cattle to the territory. But more than that, I realize now I want someone to build it with. I want a family. I want children running around this property, learning to ride and work the land. I want a wife who's my partner, not just someone to cook and clean, but someone who understands the work and the sacrifice and thinks it's worthwhile." "That's a good dream," Eleanor said. "Can I tell you mine, please? I want to keep sewing because I love creating beautiful things. But I want to do it in a home that's truly mine, shared with someone I love. I want children too, sons and daughters who know how to work with their hands and think with their hearts. I want to wake up every morning next to someone who sees me, really sees me, and thinks I'm enough." Vincent turned to look at her fully, this woman who had loved him from afar, who had been brave enough to carve his name into a tree even though she thought he'd never be hers. "Eleanor, I see you, and you're more than enough. You're everything I didn't know I was waiting for." She smiled, and even in the starlight he could see the joy in her face. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." "I'm not a man who's good with fancy words," Vincent said, "but I'm honest, and I'll work hard to make you happy if you'll give me the chance." "I'll give you that chance," Eleanor said. "I've been giving it to you in my heart for 3 years. I'm glad to finally be able to give it to you in person." They sat together on those porch steps until late into the night, talking about everything and nothing, learning the small details that build a foundation between two people. Eleanor told him about her favorite books and how she loved thunderstorms. Vincent told her about breaking his arm when he was 15, and how he still couldn't throw a rope quite right with that arm. They shared memories and hopes, fears and dreams, and with each passing hour they wove their lives together a little more tightly. When Eleanor finally said she needed to head home, Vincent insisted on riding with her to make sure she got there safely. They rode slowly in the moonlight, neither wanting the evening to end. When they reached her small house, surrounded by the garden she tended, Vincent helped her down from her horse and held her hands in his. "Can I see you again tomorrow?" he asked. "I'd like that," Eleanor replied. "I have some dresses to finish in the morning, but I'll be free by afternoon." "I'll come by after I finish the morning chores," Vincent promised. "We can go riding if you'd like. I'll show you some of the places on my property I think you'd appreciate." "I'd love that." Vincent leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Good night, Eleanor." "Good night, Vincent." He rode back to his ranch with his heart full, the night air cool against his face. When he finally lay down in his bed, he couldn't stop smiling. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for so long had lifted, replaced by something warm and hopeful. True to his word, Vincent finished his morning chores in record time the next day and rode to Eleanor's property. He found her hanging laundry in the yard, the wind catching the fabric and making it dance. She looked up as he approached, her face breaking into a smile that made his heart skip. "You're early," she said, though she didn't sound displeased. "Couldn't wait," Vincent admitted. "Are you ready to go riding?" "Let me just finish this last sheet," Eleanor said, pinning up the fabric with practiced efficiency. "Then I'm all yours." Those last 3 words hung in the air between them, full of promise. Within minutes, they were riding together across Vincent's property, and he showed her the places he loved most. The creek where he watered his cattle, running clear and cold from mountain snowmelt. The ridge where you could see for miles in every direction. The meadow where wildflowers grew so thick in summer that it looked like a painting. "It's beautiful," Eleanor said, taking it all in. "You've built something remarkable here, Vincent." "It's not complete yet," he said. "There's still so much I want to do. I want to expand the herd, maybe build a bigger barn, fix up the house properly." "Those are good goals," Eleanor said. "But don't forget to enjoy what you have right now, too. Sometimes we spend so much time building for the future that we forget to live in the present." Her words struck him deeply. She was right. He'd been so focused on the work, on making the ranch successful, that he'd forgotten to actually live. But being with Eleanor, riding across his land with her beside him, he felt truly present for the first time in years. They stopped by the creek to let the horses drink and sat on the grassy bank watching the water flow. Vincent picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his hands. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Anything." "Why my name specifically? On the tree, I mean." "You could have just carved a heart or initials or something, but you wrote out my full name." Eleanor looked at the water, her expression thoughtful. "Because I wanted it to be real. Initials or symbols, those could be anyone, but your full name, Vincent Parker, that was specific. That was honest. I wanted the tree to know exactly who I loved, even if you never did." Vincent set down the stone and turned to face her. I know now. And Eleanor, I need you to know that I'm falling in love with you. I know it's only been a day since we really talked, but the truth is I've been noticing you for longer than I admitted. I've been drawn to you without understanding why. Now that I know you, now that I see how brave you are and how true, I'm falling hard. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy ones. I never thought I'd hear you say those words. You'll hear them often if I have my way, Vincent said, reaching up to gently wipe away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. I'm not a man who plays games or says things he doesn't mean. When I give my heart, I give it completely. And I'm giving it to you, Eleanor Preston, if you'll have it. I'll have it, she whispered. I'll cherish it and protect it and love you with everything I have. This time when Vincent leaned in to kiss her, it wasn't on the forehead. Their lips met in a kiss that was tender and sweet, full of 3 years of longing and the promise of a future together. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, and it became a pattern over the following weeks. Every day, after morning chores and work were done, they found time to be together. Sometimes Vincent would ride to Eleanor's property and help her with tasks around her place, fixing a loose board on her porch or chopping wood for her stove. Other times, Eleanor would come to his ranch, and they'd work together, her presence making even the hardest tasks feel lighter. The people of Las Animas began to notice their courtship, and there was general approval. Both Vincent and Eleanor were well liked and respected, and folks thought they made a good match. On Saturdays when they'd ride into town together, they'd be greeted with friendly nods and knowing smiles. About 6 weeks after that first day at the cottonwood tree, Vincent knew it was time to make things official. He'd fallen completely in love with Eleanor, and he couldn't imagine his life without her in it. She was everything he'd needed without knowing it, strong and gentle, practical and romantic, hardworking and tender. He rode into Las Animas on a Thursday morning and went straight to the small jewelry shop run by a man named Samuel Morrison. Vincent had been setting aside money for years, and he knew exactly what he wanted. I need an engagement ring, he told Samuel. Something sturdy but beautiful, like the woman it's for. Samuel's weathered face broke into a grin. I heard you'd be coming in soon. Word travels fast in a small town. I've got just the thing. He pulled out a ring with a simple gold band and a small diamond that caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the counter. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was genuine and lovely. It's perfect, Vincent said, and counted out his money without haggling. Some things were worth whatever they cost. That evening, he invited Eleanor to ride out with him to the cottonwood grove where he'd first found her. She agreed without question, though he could see the curiosity in her eyes. They rode in comfortable silence, the summer sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. When they reached the tree, Vincent helped Eleanor down from her horse and led her to stand before the carving. His name was still there, the letters she'd so carefully cut into the bark now slightly weathered but still clear. "You remember what you told me that day?" Vincent asked. "About why you carved my name?" "I remember every word," Eleanor said softly. "I said I wanted the tree to know exactly who I loved, even if you never did." Vincent pulled out his knife, the same one Eleanor had dropped that first day, which he'd kept in his pocket ever since. "Now it's my turn," he said. Carefully, with Eleanor watching, he carved her name right below his own. Eleanor Preston, in letters that matched hers as closely as he could manage. When he finished, he stepped back to admire his work, both their names together on the tree, permanent and true. "There," he said. "Now the tree knows that I love you too." Eleanor pressed her hand to her mouth, overcome with emotion. Vincent turned to face her and slowly lowered himself to one knee, pulling the ring box from his pocket. "Eleanor Preston, you loved me for 3 years before I even knew it. You were patient and brave and true, even when you thought your love might never be returned. These past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what it means to truly share your life with someone, to build something together that's stronger than what either of us could make alone. I love you with my whole heart, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice when you carved my name on this tree. Will you marry me?" Eleanor was crying openly now, tears of pure joy streaming down her face. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Vincent, I'll marry you. I've been yours since the first time I saw you, and I'll be yours until the day I die." Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. They stood there for a long time, holding each other beneath the tree that had become sacred to them both. Finally, as darkness began to fall, they rode back to Vincent's ranch, their hands clasped together between their horses. The next few months passed in a blur of happy preparation. Eleanor wanted a simple wedding, just close friends and neighbors, and Vincent was more than happy to oblige. They decided to hold the ceremony in late September when the weather would be pleasant and the harvest mostly complete. Eleanor continued her sewing work, but now she was making her own wedding dress, a beautiful creation in cream-colored silk that she'd saved for years. Vincent worked on fixing up his ranch house, determined to make it worthy of his bride. He added proper curtains, fixed every creaky board, and even built new furniture for their bedroom with his own hands. They spent their evenings planning their future together, talking about the children they hoped to have, and how they'd run the ranch as partners. Eleanor had good ideas about breeding the cattle and managing the finances, and Vincent listened to her suggestions with respect and genuine interest. She wasn't just going to be his wife. She was going to be his true partner in every sense of the word. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the sky a perfect blue unmarred by clouds. They decided to hold the ceremony right there on Vincent's ranch, in the meadow where wildflowers still bloomed despite the lateness of the season. Eleanor arrived in a wagon driven by Mrs. Crawford, the widow Vincent had helped years ago, and when Vincent saw his bride walking toward him through the flowers, he felt his heart might burst from his chest. She was radiant, her hair crowned with a simple wreath of wildflowers, her dress catching the sunlight. But more than her physical beauty, it was the joy in her face, the love in her eyes that took his breath away. The ceremony was performed by the traveling preacher who came through Las Animas once a month, a kind man named Reverend Thomas who'd known both Vincent and Eleanor for years. He spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through good times and bad, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, the small crowd of neighbors and friends cheered with genuine happiness. Vincent kissed his wife for the first time as a married man, and Eleanor kissed him back with all the love she'd been storing up for 3 years and more. The celebration that followed was simple but heartfelt, with food and music and dancing that lasted until the stars came out. When the last guest had finally left and they were alone, Vincent lifted Eleanor in his arms and carried her over the threshold of their home. She laughed, her arms around his neck, and he felt a completeness he'd never known was possible. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a coming together of two people who'd waited and yearned and finally found each other. Vincent was gentle with Eleanor, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and loved. And Eleanor gave herself to him fully, holding nothing back. 3 years of love poured out in whispered words and soft touches. Afterward, Lying in each other's arms in the darkness, Eleanor traced patterns on Vincent's chest. "I never thought I could be this happy," she murmured. "Neither did I," Vincent admitted. "I thought I was content with my life the way it was, but I was just surviving, not living. You've shown me the difference." "We've shown each other," Eleanor corrected. "I was surviving too, watching life from a distance instead of really living it. But we're living now together." "Together," Vincent agreed and held her close as they drifted off to sleep. The first months of marriage were an adjustment, as all marriages are, but it was a joyful one. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small domestic details that make up a shared life. Eleanor proved to be just as capable around the ranch as Vincent had hoped, able to handle a horse and help with the cattle when needed. She still did her sewing, setting up a small workroom in the house where she could take commissions from the ladies of Las Animas. Vincent, for his part, learned to appreciate the small touches that made their house a home. The curtains Eleanor had made, the flowers she kept on the table, the way she hummed while she cooked. He found himself hurrying through his work not because he had to, but because he wanted to get back to her, to share the day's events and plan for tomorrow. Winter came to Colorado, bringing snow that covered the ranch in a blanket of white. Vincent and Eleanor spent the long evenings by the fire, reading together or just talking, content in each other's company. On particularly cold nights, they'd bundle up and go outside to look at the stars, so bright and clear in the winter sky, and Vincent would hold Eleanor close and thank whatever fate had led her to carve his name on that tree. Spring returned, bringing with it new life to the ranch. The cattle had calves, and Eleanor helped with the birthing, her gentle hands and calm presence making the process easier. Vincent watched her with one of the newborn calves, cooing to it softly, and felt a surge of love so strong it nearly knocked him over. It was in late spring, a year after he'd first found her at the cottonwood tree, that Eleanor came to him with news that made his heart soar. They were sitting on the porch after supper, watching the sunset as had become their habit, when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby," she said softly. "Come winter, we'll be 3 instead of 2. Vincent's eyes filled with tears, something that would have embarrassed him before he met Eleanor but which now felt natural and right. "Truly, truly," Eleanor confirmed, her own eyes shining. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," Vincent said, pulling her into his lap and holding her as if she were made of precious glass. "You've given me everything, Eleanor. A home, a partnership, love, and now a child. I don't have words for what I feel." "Then don't use words," Eleanor said, kissing him softly. "Just be here with me. That's all I need." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Vincent became even more protective of Eleanor than he'd been before. He wanted her to rest, to take things easy, but Eleanor laughed at his concerns and continued working as she always had, just being more careful about heavy lifting. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him when he fretted. "I'm healthy and strong, and so is our child. Everything will be fine." The people of Las Animas were excited about the coming baby, and the women of the town organized themselves to help. They brought food and baby clothes, advice and support, rallying around Eleanor in the way small communities do for their own. Mrs. Crawford, who had become a good friend to Eleanor, came by regularly to check on her and help with household tasks. "You saved my life when my barn burned," she told Vincent one day. "Now let me help take care of your wife. It's what neighbors do." As summer gave way to fall, Eleanor's belly grew round and prominent. Vincent would lie with his head against her stomach at night, feeling the baby kick and move, amazed that he and Eleanor had created this new life together. "What should we name the baby?" Eleanor asked one evening as they lay in bed. "I haven't given it much thought," Vincent admitted. I suppose it depends on whether it's a boy or girl. I think it's a boy, Eleanor said, her hand resting on her belly. I don't know why, but I have a feeling. Then we'll need a strong name, Vincent said. What do you think of William? We could call him Will. William Parker, Eleanor tested the name. I like it. It's solid and good like his father. And if we're wrong and it's a girl, Rose, Eleanor said immediately. I've always loved that name, Rose Parker. Then it's decided, Vincent said. William or Rose Parker arriving this winter. The snows came early that year, blanketing the ranch in white by mid-November. Vincent made sure they were well stocked with food and firewood, and he arranged for Mrs. Crawford to stay with them as Eleanor's time drew near. The older woman had helped deliver many babies in her years and knew what to do. On a cold December night, with snow falling softly outside and the fire crackling in the hearth, Eleanor's labor began. Vincent had faced down angry bulls and dangerous storms without flinching, but watching his wife in pain nearly undid him. He held her hand and wiped her brow, feeling helpless and afraid in a way he'd never experienced before. You're doing so well, Mrs. Crawford encouraged Eleanor. Just a little more, dear. The baby's almost here. Eleanor gripped Vincent's hand so hard he thought she might break his fingers, but he didn't care. He'd endure any pain if it meant she'd be all right. Hours passed, though Vincent lost track of time, focused entirely on Eleanor and the ordeal she was going through. Finally, as dawn began to break outside, filling the room with pale winter light, a baby's cry split the air. Mrs. Crawford worked quickly, and then she was placing a squirming bundle in Eleanor's arms. It's a boy, she announced with a tired smile. A healthy baby boy. Vincent looked down at his son, at the tiny red face and waving fists, and felt something break open in his chest. Love, pure and overwhelming, flooded through him. This was his son, his and Eleanor's child, born of their love and commitment to each other. Hello, William, Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her exhausted face. Hello, my sweet boy. Vincent kissed his wife's forehead, his own cheeks wet with tears. You're amazing, he told her. You're the strongest, bravest person I've ever known. We made him together, Eleanor said, looking up at him with so much love in her eyes. He's ours, Vincent, our family. The days after William's birth were challenging but joyful. Eleanor recovered well, and she took to motherhood with the same grace and competence she brought to everything else. Vincent helped as much as he could, though he felt clumsy and afraid he might break something whenever he held his tiny son. You won't break him, Eleanor assured him with amusement. Babies are sturdier than they look. Slowly, Vincent gained confidence. He learned to change diapers and soothe William when he cried. He'd walk the floor in the middle of the night with his son against his chest, humming tunelessly and feeling a contentment deeper than any he'd known. Winter passed, and spring returned again. William grew from a tiny infant into a robust baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's honey-colored eyes. Vincent built a cradle with his own hands, carving elaborate designs into the wood, and Eleanor sewed quilts and clothes, dressing their son in outfits that made him look like the little prince of their small kingdom. One warm spring day, Vincent suggested they take William to see the cottonwood tree. Eleanor agreed immediately, and they rode out together, William secured carefully in Eleanor's arms. When they reached the tree, Vincent lifted his family down and they stood together looking at the carvings. Their names were still there, weathered now by 2 years of sun and rain and snow, but still clearly visible. Vincent pulled out his knife, and below their 2 names he carefully carved a third, William Parker. Now we're all here, he said, stepping back to admire his work. Our whole family, marked on this tree where everything began. Eleanor leaned against him, William in her arms, and they stood in silence for a moment, each thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. From loneliness and secret love to this full, rich life they'd built together. "Do you ever think about that day?" Eleanor asked softly. "When you found me carving your name?" "All the time," Vincent admitted. "It was the luckiest day of my life, though I didn't know it at first. Finding you here, learning that you loved me, it changed everything." "I was so afraid," Eleanor remembered. "I thought you'd be angry or think I was strange. I never imagined it would lead to all this." "I'm glad you were brave enough to carve my name," Vincent said. "If you hadn't, we might have gone on forever, noticing each other but never speaking, never knowing what we could have together." "Everything happens the way it's meant to," Eleanor said, kissing William's soft head. "We found each other exactly when we were supposed to." The years that followed were full and happy. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing into one of the most successful in the Los Animas area. Eleanor's sewing business thrived as well, though she scaled it back to focus more on their family. 2 years after William was born, they welcomed a daughter, and they named her Rose just as they'd planned. She had Eleanor's chestnut hair and Vincent's serious blue eyes, and she wrapped her father around her tiny finger from the moment she drew breath. Vincent proved to be a devoted father, spending his evenings teaching William about the ranch and playing gentle games with Rose. He read to them from the Bible and from the few books they owned, and he told them stories about their family and the land they lived on. Eleanor watched her husband with their children and fell in love with him all over again, seeing new dimensions to the man she'd married. He was patient and kind, firm when needed but always loving, and their children adored him. When William was 5 and Rose was 3, Vincent suggested they have another celebration at the cottonwood tree. It had become a tradition of sorts, marking important occasions by visiting the place where their love story had truly begun. They rode out on a perfect summer day, the children secure on the horses with their parents. When they reached the tree, now bearing the carved names of all 4 family members, Vincent lifted William down and then helped Eleanor dismount with Rose. "Why do we come here, Papa?" William asked, touching the carvings with curious fingers. "Because this is where your mama told me she loved me," Vincent explained, kneeling down to his son's level. "This tree is special to our family. It reminds us of how we found each other and how we built our life together." "Mama carved your name?" Rose asked, her small face scrunched up in confusion. "She did," Eleanor confirmed. "I loved your papa for a long time before he knew it, and I carved his name on this tree so at least the tree would know, even if he didn't." "That's romantic," William declared with the certainty of a 5-year-old, though Vincent doubted he really understood what the word meant. "It is romantic," Vincent agreed, pulling Eleanor close with one arm while keeping his other hand on William's shoulder. Rose was perched on Eleanor's hip, playing with her mother's hair. "And it taught me something important that I want you two to remember." "What's that?" William asked. "That love is worth taking a risk for," Vincent said. "Your mama took a risk when she carved my name, and I took a risk when I opened my heart to her. And because we were both brave enough to take those risks, we have this beautiful family and this good life. So don't be afraid to tell people you care about them. Don't wait and hope they'll figure it out. Be brave like your mama was." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears and she kissed Vincent softly. "And be honest like your papa," she added. "When he found me here, he could have been angry or mocking, but he was kind and open and honest about his feelings. That honesty is what made everything possible." They spent the afternoon at the Cottonwood Grove, playing and picnicking and enjoying the warm weather. William and Rose chased butterflies and picked wildflowers, their laughter ringing through the air. Vincent and Eleanor sat together watching them, hands clasped, feeling blessed beyond measure. As the years continued to pass, the ranch grew and changed. Vincent took on a few hired hands to help with the work as the herd expanded, but he never forgot the lean years when it had been just him, alone with his cattle and his dreams. Now those dreams had been exceeded beyond what he'd ever imagined. William grew into a sturdy boy who loved the ranch life, following his father everywhere and learning everything he could about cattle and horses and the land. Rose proved to be artistic like her mother, showing an early talent for drawing and sewing. When she was 6, Eleanor began teaching her to make doll clothes, and Rose took to it with enthusiasm. 3 years after Rose was born, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder on her, and Vincent worried constantly. But Eleanor remained calm and confident, trusting in her body and the life growing inside her. "God willing, we'll have another healthy baby," she told Vincent when he fretted. "And if not, we still have each other and our 2 beautiful children. We're already blessed, Vincent. Anything else is just more blessing on top of blessing." Her faith and strength amazed him, even after all their years together. In October, Eleanor gave birth to twin boys, and Vincent thought his heart might explode from joy and terror in equal measure. 2 more sons to love and raise and guide into good men. They named the twins James and Thomas, and if William and Rose had been adored, the twins were absolutely worshipped by the entire family. William, now 8, took his role as big brother very seriously, helping to watch over the babies. Rose, at 6, was fascinated by the twins and wanted to help with everything. The ranch house, which had once seemed too large for one lonely man, now burst with life and noise and love. Vincent added on 2 more rooms to give the children space to grow, and Eleanor created a home that was warm and welcoming, a place where friends and neighbors were always welcome. On Sundays, they'd ride into Las Animas for church, the whole family together in the wagon, and people would comment on what a fine family they were. Vincent would catch Eleanor's eye during these moments, and they'd share a smile, remembering how it had all begun with a name carved on a tree. 10 years after their wedding, Vincent and Eleanor returned to the Cottonwood Grove alone, having left the children with Mrs. Crawford for the evening. It was their anniversary, and Vincent wanted to spend it at the place that held such meaning for them both. The tree had grown in the intervening years, the trunk thicker, the branches more sprawling. Their carved names had stretched and weathered but were still clearly visible, a permanent record of their love. 10 years, Eleanor said softly, leaning against Vincent as they stood before the tree. "It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "Best 10 years of my life," Vincent said, wrapping his arms around his wife. "Every day with you has been a gift, Eleanor. Even the hard days, the times when money was tight or the cattle got sick or the children were difficult. Having you beside me made everything bearable, everything better." "I love you more now than I did when I carved your name," Eleanor confessed. "I didn't think that was possible, but it's true. The man I fell in love with from afar was good and kind and hardworking. But the man I've lived with, built a life with, raised children with, he's so much more than I could have imagined. You've exceeded every dream I had, Vincent." Vincent turned Eleanor to face him, his hands cupping her face gently. "I was half alive before I found you here. I was going through the motions of life, but not really living. You woke me up, Eleanor. You showed me what it means to truly share your life with someone, to love someone more than yourself. You gave me a family and a purpose beyond just working the land. You gave me everything." They kissed there beneath the tree, a kiss full of 10 years of love and partnership, of shared struggles and joys, of a life built together from nothing but hope and hard work and devotion. As they rode back to the ranch in the gathering dusk, Eleanor rested her head on Vincent's shoulder. "Do you think the children will understand someday what this tree means to us?" "I think they already do in their own way," Vincent said. "But when they're older, when they fall in love themselves, they'll understand it even better. And maybe they'll tell their children about their grandmother who was brave enough to carve her love into a tree, and their grandfather who was smart enough to love her back." "That's a good legacy," Eleanor said, "to be remembered for loving each other well." The children grew, each developing their own personalities and paths. William proved to be a natural rancher, taking to the work with an enthusiasm that made Vincent proud. At 18, he was already handling much of the day-to-day operations, freeing Vincent to focus on planning and expansion. Rose, at 16, had become an accomplished seamstress, her work even finer than Eleanor's. She'd started taking commissions of her own, creating beautiful dresses for the young ladies of Las Animas. She was courted by several young men, but she held them all at arm's length, declaring she wasn't ready to settle down yet. The twins, James and Thomas, now 10 years old, were inseparable and adventurous, always getting into some scrape or another. They loved the ranch but weren't as devoted to it as William, showing instead an interest in exploration and discovery. Vincent encouraged this, wanting his sons to find their own paths in life. As Vincent approached his 45th birthday, he reflected on how far he'd come from that lonely rancher he'd been at 27. His hair was now streaked with gray, and his face bore the lines of a life well lived. Eleanor, at 41, was still beautiful to him, perhaps even more so than she'd been as a young woman. Time and motherhood had given her a grace and confidence that took his breath away. They still visited the cottonwood tree regularly, sometimes as a family, sometimes just the two of them. It had become their sacred place, the spot where their love story had begun, and where they could reconnect with that initial spark that had brought them together. One spring day, when Vincent was 47 and Eleanor 43, they rode out to the tree and found something unexpected. Below their carved names and the names of their children, someone had carved a heart with 2 sets of initials inside, WP and SM. "William," Eleanor breathed, understanding immediately. "And Sarah Miller." Vincent studied the carving with mixed emotions. Sarah was the daughter of one of their neighbors, a sweet girl who'd been friends with William since childhood. "I didn't know he had feelings for her." "I did," Eleanor admitted. "I've seen the way he looks at her, the way she looks at him. It's how you used to look at me before we married, when you thought I wasn't watching." "History repeating itself," Vincent mused. "Our son carving his love on the same tree where you carved mine." "Is it all right?" Eleanor asked. "I know you wanted him to focus on the ranch." "The ranch means nothing if there's no one to share it with," Vincent said firmly. "I learned that lesson when I found you here. If William loves Sarah and she loves him, then I'm happy for them. The ranch will still be there, but love, that's what makes life worth living." They told William that evening that they knew about his feelings for Sarah, and the young man's face turned red with embarrassment. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I just wanted to be sure she felt the same way first." "And does she?" Eleanor asked gently. "She does," William confirmed, his face breaking into a smile that reminded Vincent of his own expression when Eleanor had first said she loved him. "I'm going to ask her father for permission to court her properly. I wanted to do it right." "That's good," Vincent approved. "But William, make sure you're ready. Marriage and family, they're blessings, but they're also responsibility. You have to be prepared to put someone else first for the rest of your life." "I know, Pa," William said seriously. "You and Ma taught me that. I've watched how you love each other, how you work together and support each other. That's what I want with Sarah. I've been thinking about this for years." Eleanor hugged her son tightly. "Then you have our blessing. Sarah is a wonderful girl, and I think she'll make you very happy." 6 months later, William and Sarah were married in the same meadow where Vincent and Eleanor had wed nearly 20 years before. It was a joyous occasion, with friends and family gathered from all over the territory. Vincent walked William to stand before the preacher, just as his father should have done for him if the old man had lived to see it, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. His son was starting his own journey, building his own life, and Vincent had shown him how. After William and Sarah married, they built a small house on the edge of Vincent's property, close enough to help with the ranch but far enough to have their own space. Sarah proved to be as capable and hardworking as Eleanor, and the two women became close friends as well as family. A year after William's wedding, Rose announced that she'd accepted a proposal from a young banker in Los Animas named Henry Peterson. Vincent had his doubts about a man who worked with money rather than the land, but Rose was adamant that Henry was the right man for her. "He's kind and steady and he loves me, Papa," she insisted. "He respects my work and wants me to keep sewing even after we're married. He's good like you." How could Vincent argue with that? He gave his blessing, and Rose was married that autumn in a celebration almost as large as William's had been. She moved into town with Henry, but she visited the ranch often, never losing her connection to the family and the land she'd grown up on. The twins, approaching their teenage years, continued their education and their adventures. Vincent knew they'd probably leave Colorado eventually, seeking their fortunes elsewhere, and while the thought saddened him, he understood it. He'd given them roots, but he'd also given them wings, and he had to trust that they'd use both wisely through it all. Vincent and Eleanor remained the center of their family, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They still worked together on the ranch, though they'd hired enough help that the burden wasn't as heavy as it once had been. They still spent their evenings on the porch, watching the sunset and talking about their day. They still loved each other with a depth and devotion that inspired everyone who knew them. When Vincent was 50 and Eleanor 46, they celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary by riding out to the cottonwood tree. It had become a ritual, marking each milestone of their marriage at the place where it had all begun. The tree now bore many carvings, their original names, the names of their children, William and Sarah's initials, and even a few marks from the twins who'd insisted on leaving their mark as well. It was a family tree in the truest sense, a living record of their love and the family it had created. 23 years, Vincent said, tracing the original carving of his name, now deeply weathered and stretched by the tree's growth. "Sometimes I still can't believe how lucky I got the day I found you here." "We were both lucky," Eleanor corrected, taking his hand. "I was lucky you saw me, lucky you didn't laugh or turn away, lucky you were brave enough to love me back." "Loving you was the easiest thing I ever did," Vincent said honestly. "Everything else, the ranch, raising the kids, all of it was hard work, but loving you, being with you, that's always been effortless." They stood together in the shade of the tree, two people who'd built an entire life from a moment of courage and honesty, and felt the weight of those years in the best possible way. They'd faced challenges and struggles, losses and disappointments, but they'd faced them together, and that had made all the difference. By the time Vincent reached his mid-50s, the ranch was firmly established as one of the best in Colorado. William had taken over most of the operations, running things with the same dedication and care that Vincent had shown. Sarah had given them 3 grandchildren, 2 boys and a girl, who were the lights of Vincent and Eleanor's life. Rose and Henry had 2 children of their own, daughters who showed signs of inheriting their mother's artistic talent. The twins had both left Colorado as Vincent had suspected they might. James had gone to California, drawn by stories of opportunity and adventure. Thomas had headed east to Denver, taking a position with the railroad company. But they all came home for holidays and important occasions, and the ranch house would fill with children and grandchildren, noise and laughter and love. Eleanor would cook enormous meals, and Vincent would tell stories, and they'd all gather on the porch to watch the sunset together. 3 generations bound by blood and love and shared history. On Vincent's 60th birthday, the entire family gathered at the cottonwood tree for a special celebration. It was Eleanor's idea, wanting to show their children and grandchildren the place that had started everything, the source from which all their blessings had flowed. They rode out together, a procession of horses and wagons, young and old, carrying food and supplies for a proper picnic. When they reached the tree, Vincent felt emotion rise in his throat at seeing all these people, all this life that had come from one moment of bravery when Eleanor had carved his name. "Tell us the story, Grandpa," one of the grandchildren pleaded, and others quickly joined in. "Tell us about the tree." Vincent looked at Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. So he told them, these children and grandchildren who were his legacy, about being a lonely rancher who'd convinced himself that solitude was enough. About finding a woman carving his name and learning that she'd loved him for 3 years from afar. About taking a chance on love and having it change his entire life. Eleanor added her parts of the story, about watching Vincent from her property, admiring his strength and kindness, building up the courage to carve his name even though she thought he'd never be hers. "So the lesson," Vincent concluded, looking at each face gathered around him, "is that love is worth fighting for, worth taking risks for. Your grandmother was brave enough to show her love, even when she thought it might not be returned. And I was smart enough to recognize the gift I was being offered and accept it with both hands. Everything good in my life has come from that moment, from that choice to love and be loved." The grandchildren considered this seriously, and then one of William's boys, a thoughtful child of 7, asked, "Are you going to carve something new on the tree today, Grandpa?" Vincent hadn't planned to, but the suggestion felt right. He pulled out his knife, the same one Eleanor had dropped that first day, which he still carried always, and approached the tree. Below all the other carvings, in a space he'd been unconsciously saving, he carved, "Love endures, VP and EP, forever." "There," he said, stepping back. "Now everyone will know that our love didn't just start here. It endured here. Through good times and bad, through all the years and all the changes, our love endured." Eleanor came to stand beside him, her hand slipping into his as naturally as breathing. "Forever," she agreed softly. The celebration lasted until sunset, with games and food and stories shared. Vincent watched his family, this wonderful, chaotic collection of people who existed because he and Eleanor had found each other, and felt a contentment so deep, it was almost painful. As they packed up to leave, William came to stand beside his father. "You built something amazing here, Pa," he said quietly. "Not just the ranch, though that's impressive enough, but this family, this love that holds us all together. You and Ma, you showed us what a marriage should be, what a partnership looks like. I try to do the same with Sarah, to love her the way you love Ma." Vincent clapped his son on the shoulder, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. William had grown into such a fine man, and Vincent was proud beyond words. The years continued their steady march. Vincent's hair went completely white, and Eleanor's chestnut locks became streaked with silver. They moved a bit slower, their bodies showing the wear of lives fully lived, but their love remained as strong as ever. On their 30th anniversary, They made the journey to the cottonwood tree one more time. It was harder now. Vincent's knees ached from decades of ranch work, and Eleanor's hands were gnarled with arthritis from years of sewing. But they made it, moving slowly but steadily, because this place was sacred to them. The tree had grown even more, now truly majestic, its branches spreading wide and its trunk thick and strong. All their carvings were still visible, though weathered and stretched, a timeline of their love written in bark. 30 years, Eleanor said, leaning against Vincent for support and comfort both. 3 decades of loving you. And I've loved you for every minute of it, Vincent said. Well, maybe every minute after you explained why you were carving my name. Those first few minutes I was mostly just confused. Eleanor laughed, the sound still as beautiful to him as it had been when they first met. Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't found me here that day? If you'd gone a different direction or checked a different part of your property? Sometimes, Vincent admitted, and it terrifies me. I came so close to missing you, to living my whole life alone and never knowing what I was missing. But I did find you, and you were brave enough to tell me the truth, and we built this beautiful life together. No regrets? Eleanor asked softly. Not a single one, Vincent said firmly. Every choice I've made since the day I met you, I'd make again in a heartbeat. You've been the best part of my life, Eleanor Parker. The very best part. They stood together beneath the tree. 2 people who'd loved each other for 30 years and would love each other for however many more they were granted. The sun set behind them, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Vincent thought about how every sunset he'd watched with Eleanor had been beautiful, how every day with her had been a gift. More years passed, bringing with them the inevitable challenges of age. Vincent's body, so strong for so long, began to fail him in small ways. His joints ached, his vision wasn't as sharp, and he tired more easily. Eleanor developed a cough that worried everyone, though she insisted it was nothing serious. But they still had each other, still shared their home and their bed and their lives. They'd sit together on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the chill, and remember their years together. The hard times and the good times, the children raised and the grandchildren spoiled, the life they'd built from nothing but love and determination. William ran the ranch now with his own sons helping, just as Vincent had run it with his father before meeting Eleanor. Rose visited often with her family, bringing light and laughter. The twins came home less frequently, their lives taking them far from Colorado, but they wrote letters and sent photographs, staying connected across the miles. Vincent and Eleanor's 70 grandchildren and great-grandchildren were scattered across several states now, but they all knew the story of the cottonwood tree. It had become family legend, passed down from generation to generation, a reminder that love was worth fighting for, worth taking risks for, worth building a life around. On a warm spring morning when Vincent was 67 and Eleanor 63, Vincent woke to find his wife still sleeping beside him. That wasn't unusual. They both slept later than they used to. But something made him look closer, made him reach out to touch her shoulder gently. Eleanor's eyes fluttered open, and she smiled at him with the same love she'd shown for more than 30 years. "Good morning," she whispered. "Good morning," Vincent replied, relief flooding through him. For a moment he'd thought, but no, she was here, she was fine. "I had the most wonderful dream," Eleanor said, her voice soft. "We were young again, standing at the cottonwood tree. You just found me carving your name, and you were looking at me with such surprise and hope. And I thought in the dream that I'd do it all again exactly the same way." "So would I," Vincent said, taking her hand and pressing it to his lips. "Every day with you has been worth it, Eleanor. Every single day." They lay there together, holding hands and watching the sun rise through the window, and Vincent felt a peace settle over him. Whatever days they had left, they'd face them together, just as they'd faced everything together. Eleanor's cough worsened over the next few months, and despite the doctor's best efforts, she grew gradually weaker. Vincent stayed by her side constantly, and on the days when she felt well enough, they'd sit on the porch and remember their life together. "I want to go to the tree one more time," Eleanor said one autumn morning when the leaves were turning gold. "Eleanor, I don't think," Vincent began, worried about the journey. "Please," she interrupted gently. "I need to see it one more time, where it all began." How could he deny her? With William's help, they got Eleanor onto a horse, supporting her carefully, and rode slowly to the cottonwood grove. It took much longer than it used to, but they made it, and Vincent lifted Eleanor down carefully, holding her upright as she stood before the tree. All their carvings were still there, stretched and weathered but enduring, just like their love. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, touching the place where she'd carved his name so many years ago. "Thank you for finding me here. Thank you for loving me." "Thank you for being brave enough to carve my name," Vincent replied, his arms around her, supporting her weight. "Thank you for waiting for me, for loving me even when I didn't know it. Thank you for every day we've had together." They stood there until Eleanor grew too tired, and then Vincent lifted her onto her horse and they rode slowly home. That night, Eleanor slept peacefully in Vincent's arms, and in the morning, she didn't wake up. The grief hit Vincent like a physical blow. In 33 years of marriage, he'd never spent more than a few days apart from Eleanor. She'd been his partner, his love, his other half, and now she was gone. The house felt too quiet, too empty, even though William and his family moved in temporarily to keep Vincent company. They buried Eleanor on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a view of the cottonwood grove in the distance. The entire family gathered, along with what seemed like half of Las Animas, to pay their respects. She touched so many lives with her kindness and strength, and people came from miles around to mourn her passing. Vincent stood by her grave and felt like half of himself had been buried there. But he also felt grateful, so incredibly grateful, for the years they'd had, for a love that had sustained him through everything, for a partnership that had created a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were both gone. In the months after Eleanor's death, Vincent found himself riding to the cottonwood tree often. It was where he felt closest to her, where he could remember that first day and all the days that followed. He'd stand there, his hand pressed against the bark, and talk to her as if she could hear him. "I miss you," he'd say. "Every day, every moment I miss you, but I'm grateful too. Grateful for every day we had. You made me the luckiest man alive, Eleanor. You loved me when I was lonely and lost, and you stayed by my side through everything. I'll love you until I take my last breath, and then I'll love you beyond that, wherever we go next." The years passed, and Vincent grew older. He eventually moved into William's house, unable to care for himself alone anymore. But he insisted on riding to the cottonwood tree whenever he was able, maintaining his connection to the place where his life had truly begun. On a spring morning when Vincent was 73, William helped him onto a horse one last time. "The tree, Pa?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "The tree," Vincent confirmed. They rode out together, father and son, to the cottonwood grove. The tree was even more magnificent now, having weathered decades of storms and seasons. Vincent dismounted with William's help and stood before it, touching the carvings that had lasted all these years. His name carved by Eleanor's hand. Her name carved by his. Their children's names. The marks left by their entire family over the course of 3 decades. It was all still there, a testament to enduring love. Vincent pulled out his knife, the same one Eleanor had dropped that first day, which he still carried always. Below everything else, he carved one final message. "I'm coming home to you." William saw the words and felt tears spring to his eyes. "Pa, it's all right, son," Vincent said peacefully. "I've had a good life, a full life. I've been blessed beyond what any man deserves. Your mother gave me everything, and when I go, I'll be with her again. That's all I want now." They sat together under the tree for a long time, and Vincent told William stories about Eleanor, about their life together, about the love that had sustained them both. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in the same golden colors it had shown on that first day when Vincent found Eleanor at the tree, Vincent felt a deep contentment settle over him. "Thank you, son," he said quietly, "for everything. For being such a good man, for taking care of the ranch, for giving us grandchildren. Your mother was so proud of you. I'm so proud of you." "Pa, don't," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're going to be fine. We'll get you home, William," Vincent interrupted gently. "I'm already home. This is where I found her. This is where our love began, and this is where I want to be when I go to find her again." As the last light faded from the sky, Vincent Parker closed his eyes beneath the cottonwood tree where his wife had once carved his name, and slipped peacefully away. His last thought was of Eleanor, young and beautiful, standing at this tree with a knife in her hand and love in her eyes, and he smiled. They buried Vincent next to Eleanor on the hillside, and the entire family gathered once more to say goodbye. But there was comfort in the grief, because everyone knew that Vincent and Eleanor were together again, their love transcending even death. The ranch continued under William's capable management, and he made sure to teach his own children and grandchildren about their grandparents' love story. The cottonwood tree became a landmark for the family, a place where marriages were proposed and anniversaries celebrated, where the next generations would come to remember where it all began. Years later, when William was an old man himself, he rode out to the tree with his own grandchildren and showed them the carvings. "Your great-grandmother was brave enough to carve her love into this tree," he told them. "And your great-grandfather was wise enough to love her back. They built our entire family from that single moment of courage and honesty. Remember that. Remember that love is always worth fighting for, always worth the risk." The children touched the weathered carvings reverently, connecting with ancestors they'd never known but whose love had made their own lives possible. And the tree stood witness, as it had for decades, to the enduring power of love and the legacy it leaves behind. The story of Vincent and Eleanor Parker became a cornerstone of their family's history, passed down through generations. Great-great-grandchildren who never knew them would hear about the lonely rancher who found a woman carving his name on a tree, about the love that blossomed from that moment, about a partnership that created a dynasty. The cottonwood tree still stands on what is now a sprawling family ranch, preserved and protected by generations of Parkers who understand its significance. Young couples in the family still visit it before their weddings, asking for blessings from Vincent and Eleanor. Children still climb its branches and trace the old carvings, connecting with their history. And sometimes, on warm spring afternoons when the light is just right, visitors to the tree say they can feel something special in the air around it. Love, perhaps, that was so strong it left an imprint on the land itself. Or maybe just the echo of two people who found each other, loved each other completely, and built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. Because in the end, that's what Vincent and Eleanor did. They took a moment of courage, a confession carved into bark, and transformed it into a love story that would inspire generations. They proved that the deepest loves often begin in the quietest ways, with a woman brave enough to carve a name and a man wise enough to see the gift being offered. Their love story didn't just end when they died. It continued in every child and grandchild they'd raised, in every marriage their example inspired, in every person who heard their story and decided to be brave enough to pursue love themselves. Under a cottonwood tree in Colorado, Eleanor Preston had carved Vincent Parker's name, not knowing she was also carving their future, their family, and a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come. And that, perhaps, is the greatest happy ending of all, not just that two people found love and happiness together, but that their love created ripples that continued spreading long after they were gone, touching lives and inspiring hearts for years to come. In the end, Vincent and Eleanor's love story became immortal, not carved in stone but written in the hearts of all who knew them and all who would come after. A testament to the power of love to transform not just individual lives but entire generations.